Hello, and welcome to the Inside EVs podcast for July the 23rd, 21, episode number 68. Our top stories today, we ride in the Ford F-150 Lightning. We're taking a deep dive into DC fast charging with an industry expert. Mercedes lays out a new electrification plan and teases a new vehicle or two. I'm Dominic Yoni, Inside EVs forum moderator and Inside EVs editor. Joining us today is the world-renowned Mr. Tom Moloughney, Inside EV's editor and host of the YouTube channel State of Charge with Tom Moloughney. We also have the mellifluous Martin Lee from the EV News Daily podcast, available on all your usual podcast platforms. And of course, Kyle Connor joins us from Out of Spec Studios. He also puts together incredibly inspirational videos for the Inside EV's YouTube channel. And we have a special guest with us today. Please welcome Mr. Dan O'Shea to the Inside EVs podcast. Dan is the Director of Utility Strategy and Business Development, EV Infrastructure at ABB. So before we get going, I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show. If you're watching on YouTube or Twitch, please ring that bell icon for notifications. All right. Welcome, everybody. So this week, we're definitely going to talk about what we've been driving, including the Ford F-150 Lightning and Jeep 4xe Wrangler, but not right away. Instead, this week, we're going to dive deep into fast charging and charging infrastructure. So Dan here is from ABB, and ABB, of course, is the title sponsor of the Formula E Championship Series, but it's also, it's EV-oriented bread and butter business is charging equipment and services. They sell chargers ranging from 3 kilowatts AC charger to for your home to 600 kilowatt chargers for buses, and they have a lot of other related products as well. Apparently, the company has been doing quite well of late, and future sales forecasts look robust. So, Dan, your official title at ABB is Director of Utility Strategy and Business Development, EV Infrastructure. So, can you tell us what you do there? What does that mean exactly?
Sure thing. I see you put that's actually from our website, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So my main role is to build on the existing relationships that ABB has with utilities. So our main business with utilities, with electrification, has been going on for a little bit, for a long time, 135 years. So,
it's a while.
Yeah, it's true. And finally, I found something older in the business than me. My role with utilities ranges from, and it really depends on where the utility is, right? If the utility hasn't done EV programs and is a regulated utility, then I am available to discuss with them how to go to commission, how to create programs, how to really stand something up that is going to be a benefit to EV drivers, but then all ratepayers, and will be good business for the utility. That can include working on language for commission filings, for programs, for single-family homes, for commercial public fast charging, for fleets. That's a lot of what I did before I joined ABB. I've been at ABB a couple of years. Prior to that, I had my own company, chief cook and bottle washer at a consulting company, and I worked mostly with utilities on these kinds of programs, some private companies. I also work on the business of the day. So plenty of utilities, especially in California, but also New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, in the Southeast, Colorado, Minnesota, utilities that are actively participating in the space, that have really robust programs and experienced staff who are executing on them, and ABB provides product and service for those programs. And then on the business development side, utilities are getting into product development. And they're innovating, which has not been in the DNA of utilities, right? And so, but it's super exciting to be able to work on some things like vehicle grid integration and things like that, battery energy storage for charging sites, mobile battery energy storage, things that are not on the street today, but that are necessary in certain instances. The public safety power shutoffs in California and the resiliency that's needed there, and in Florida on the Gulf Coast. EVs are actually going to be a critical part of resiliency projects around the world. Right. Where so it's exciting. I get to work on a whole lot of exciting stuff, and somehow someone thought it was a great idea to send me to the Formula E, and so I got to go. That's where I met Kyle, and that was just a great experience, I have to say. I learned a lot. And it really came out of an abstraction of an ABB sponsorship to something that actually puts technology into everyone's hands. It comes out of the race, they work it, and then they make it commercially viable.
So the Formula E race was in New York City, I guess last weekend?
A couple of weekends ago. London this weekend, we got a double header at London's Excel Docklands Arena. So the ABB Formula One is back. The practicing starts just after this podcast finishes, and you can watch it on YouTube. So there you go. Don't tune out when we finish at 4.
All right. So we often debate here on the podcast how well prepared we are or not going to be for this huge wave of electrification that's coming over the next 10 to 15 years. So I think we can mostly agree that there's likely to be a choke point where we have too many cars for the amount of available charging. So how do you see those challenges in your work? Do you think that there can be a profit motive for the market to step in and mostly take care of it, or what's it going to take to get the infrastructure to properly reflect the need for it as it grows? Is it going to be like a utility-driven thing? As you work with the utilities a lot, I'm not sure if we understand exactly their role in all of this.
Mm-hmm. It's a big hairy question, and the answer is yet to be determined. It's been a progression there in the early days, and so early days, when I say that, it's like 2010, right?
Sure.
The utilities were coming onto the scene, but there were a lot of stakeholders who were creating businesses who said they looked at utilities as the legacy companies that are not going to innovate, and said, probably, this should not be the sole purview of utilities. We need agile, fast innovation happening in this space. And those folks are not wrong, right? And so, but what ended up happening was, when the commissions would meet and review the programs that the utilities wanted to do, because utilities would want to own and operate as per their business models, there were interveners, and so what you ended up with over a course of a lot of negotiations in California were what are called make-ready programs. So that means that the utility would be allowed to do what utilities do really, really well: build the infrastructure that leads up to the plug. Okay. But then the end user was going to have to buy the chargers and perhaps get a rebate. That works pretty well with level 2 chargers. They're not that expensive. You can put a lot of them in. Once you start getting into our wheelhouse and the highway corridor projects, this is not something that your strip mall real estate operator or even a business park, a landlord, is going to look at and be able to afford in any reasonable way. So,
you're talking about like a station with several like 150 to 350 kilowatt chargers, or like a huge station of them?
Actually, it's all relative. So the picture you're showing now of 4 charge posts, right? Technically, each of those charge posts could put 350 kilowatts into a vehicle if the vehicle could take it. And so that's quite a load, right? You're looking at a parking garage or even a gas station plaza that maybe has a 240 service. It might have 150 amps to 200 amps. It might only be single phase. And for those that aren't familiar with all that, and by the way, don't ask me engineering questions. I'm not an engineer. That commercial load is necessary to do this, and many places don't have that. So this is where the utility comes in and does a really great job, because they'll pay for those infrastructure upgrades. But you could be looking at the cost on the other side of the meter, right, where the customer has to pay in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's just not something that a retailer or a business is going to be able to digest. Right. So this is where utilities really have a place, right, where they can come in and build the backbone of these expensive EV chargers that don't have the utilization. And as with any asset, you build something, you need people to walk in the door. You need people to come to your website. You need people to use it. That's utilization in our world. Right. And there are going to be places where the utilization is low. When utilization is low, your payback time horizon is long, and there's not a huge appetite for that kind of financing, especially in a new industry. Right. However, utilities having a guaranteed rate of return are frankly the perfect kind of entity to build this backbone. And so I think what we're seeing is a little bit of a progression back towards utilities being able to own and operate. Okay. So that's there's a lot more there. Right. But I wanted to kind of describe it that way. And if you guys have questions about that, or you want me to elaborate on something, please let me know.
Yeah, well, Tom, okay, go ahead, Tom. No, go before I do. Go ahead.
One of the biggest questions that I have is, do you see progress being made with regards to demand charges? Because I know the demand charges can be so high that it really just scares people away from installing DC fast charging, even if they're willing to put out that initial hundreds of thousands of dollars that you were talking about. If they're operating a site and losing thousands of dollars a month because the utilization isn't really high, but you know what? There happens to be one point in the month where 3 cars come in and plug in at 150 kilowatts. So, the demand charges just turn out to be enormous. Mm-hmm. Now, I know there's things like on-site battery storage, but that's also incredibly expensive, where we are today. Do you see progress being made with utilities with regards to, working on getting those demand charges reasonable so private enterprise can or might be more willing to install, a bank of ultra fast DC fast chargers?
I do, actually. I'll point to a program in particular. The New York Power Authority, or NYPA, has got, they're doing what they call building the backbone in the state of New York. And so I'm a New Yorker, by the way. I grew up on Long Island. I worked in the city. I ended up on the West Coast, but I'm a New Yorker at heart. So when I say New York, it goes slightly above the Bronx, but it's a big state, right? And NYPA is doing a fantastic job of building this backbone throughout the entire state, which is necessary. They have a demand charge waiver or demand charge holiday in their program so that these sites can operate at a profit sooner. And this is the kind of piloting, of testing, of business models that needs to happen. And there are many programs around the US that have been filed by utilities that are actually doing this. They're actually coming to the commission and they're saying, we need this to be able to do this, to test this business model. And they are getting the thumbs up in many cases. And then many utilities, thousands of them that are municipally owned or cooperative, that are not subject to the commissions, are also doing this. They also have demand charges, and they're also working on either a waiver or what's called a demand charge holiday. And then the other side of that, where that's a temporary fix, right? Because it'll sunset after a few years. And the best way to do this, right, is to have a calculation that sunsets the waiver based on utilization. Mm-hmm. So instead of just saying, like, here's an example, a bad example of funding that that doesn't hit the mark. So the investment tax credit or production tax credits for renewables, okay, for solar and wind. You might have this tax credit that would be for 2 years and then it sunsets, and then the legislature has to come back and do it again. This dampens long-term investment in that sector. This is why one of the reasons why solar and renewables have kind of had this up and down investment, progression. It's better now, but what needs to happen, say, for utilization and demand charges is as utilization rates go up, then your demand charge can go down. Your demand charge waiver can sunset. And once you get to that inflection point where the curves, can I do that on the camera? Can the curves cross? then you're in the black, right? You're getting a return on investment and you don't need that support anymore. And I think what the other part of utilities owning and operating, where companies were coming in and saying, hey, this is a capitalist society, we can innovate. This is where you want private investment, and private investment is critical, right? And at ABB, we believe in a portfolio approach where utilities have a very strong role, but we very much support investment in the private sector and innovative thinking to bring it to the market. So that's one way to, I think, address the demand charge issue. It's a very real issue. And tariffs, that's the other thing I want to say. So you've got the sunsetting on the holidays, but then tariffs. So, and what I mean is rates. How much are people paying for electricity? Commercial rates for a charging station plaza or retail, and then your home rate that you're paying. Having a different rate for EV charging or something that acknowledges the different patterns of electricity use for EVs. The fact that you're now, when you build a garage as a home builder, or when you build a parking garage, you're not building a parking garage. You're building a fueling station.
Right.
All right. It's a very different way of thinking about what that building is going to be doing in the future. And that includes electrical service. And so that needs to be rethought as to the rates that are going to be charged. So that's another thing, rate design or tariffs, that is a very significant topic in utility business.
A couple things I think are interesting to point out are, Dan, you and I spent last weekend, 2 weekends together, and we had a blast at Formula E. I also got to meet some of your colleagues and learn a little bit more about ABB as a whole. First off, it's just crazy how huge ABB is when you think about it. You guys recently purchased, I believe it was GE Power Solutions for like $2 billion or some, pocket change amount of money, and it basically is in like every home in America, all of our switchboards and panels, and so the company's scope is massive. My experience working with ABB comes from the charging side, these older 50 kilowatt box units from back in the day. Sometimes 10 years ago, ABB was one of the first suppliers of DC fast charging equipment, and it's been amazing to see it progress over the years to now 350 kilowatt charging. You and I had an interesting conversation. I'd like to at least touch on it. I know we're not going to get too heavy into the engineering side of things, but we were discussing the implications of DC charging in harsh weather environments, specifically Norway or Alaska. And you had mentioned some, I would say, advantages or strategic software in your units to handle these colder temperatures, where they don't just basically brick themselves when it gets cold out.
So there's there's the temperature extreme. Like if you look at the spec sheets, like negative 35 degrees Fahrenheit is still an operating temperature, and then you've got a storage temperature that is lower than that. Our units will stop operating around that low temperature, but they will come back on once the temperature rises up. And the same thing is actually on the hot side, right? So in Arizona or is somewhere in the desert. And we've been installing stations in Northern Europe and Canada. We've done some stuff up, frankly, I think it's up by the North Pole in testing. And so we know that we work in these harsh environments. You mentioned ABB being a big company. So we're global. We're based in Zurich. We operate in over 100 countries. We've got our chargers in over 85 countries. I came when I came to ABB, I came from a company of one, from me to ABB, and I mean I've been at other companies before, but nothing this big. So we have and the other thing that's important about a company like ABB putting their experience into a new product line of EV chargers. So new to us, right? 2010 is when we started on EV chargers. But the company's been inventing and making power electronics and power modules for more than 50 years. And this is one of the basic components of the DC fast chargers, conversion and power electronics. We've been doing that in harsh environments for 50 years and working on utilities in harsh environments for 135 years. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge on making things that can operate anywhere in the world. That was a long answer to your question, but there's a reason why that we can do that.
So Anthony C is asking, does ABB think on-site battery storage for chargers will be a popular option for local electric co-ops and PUDs? And in that vein, so ancillary grid services like frequency regulation and storage like this to create a virtual power plant. Are these things that you see the different locations in a fast charge network having, or is this maybe just in some locations or not at all? Or
I think it's definitely something that can happen, and it is happening in pilots around the world. So I've had, so this is part of put my business development hat on. A particular utility that has really high demand charges and had made a decent sized purchase of EV chargers was now wrestling with their site hosts who were experiencing high demand charges. So they came to us and said, how about battery energy storage to offset that? And so that's a project that is getting worked on now. We don't have a product off the shelf for that. In Europe, though, we have what we call a containerized solution that can connect to batteries with the switchgear and everything in a container. And these are getting smaller and more mobile. As a matter of fact, here's an example of what we do at Formula E that will translate to the street, right? And this has to do with uninterruptible. Did I say that right?
Uninterruptible, huh?
Not to be interrupted power supply.
Yes.
We actually provide it's called UPS and not the delivery company. For the broadcast facilities at Formula E around the world, we have containerized a UPS system that will be a backup in case it goes offline. And this is something that is compact enough to travel with the circus, so to speak, of Formula E around the world. And this is something that is going to eventually make its way into the mainstream. Right now, they're pretty big containers, right? If you were to try to do one of these, we're doing one now with some utilities for the public safety power shutoffs. It's a pretty big container. It goes on an 18-wheeler. It's got switchgear in it. It's got chargers in it.
But how many kilowatt hours of storage would that have?
I think one of the batteries we're working with is 75.
75 kilowatt hours?
I think so.
Okay.
But there could be a wide range. So,
right.
So this is not something that you can call your ABB rep and say, I want one of these today, because it's not an off-the-shelf product. Okay. Right. It is a, I don't want to say aspirational, because you can actually put it together, using subcontractors today. Absolutely. It is something that we do sell and make in Europe. Now that's big and complicated, which is what we're really good at. But what about simple, easy, and less expensive? We made a strategic investment in a company called FreeWire. And FreeWire became famous for their mobile charging solution, which has done reasonably well, but they had challenges. But then they went back to the drawing board and came up with the Boost charger, which is a battery with I think it's a 120 kilowatt charger on the other side of it. The genius of this is that it connects at single phase 240 and converts and then spits out DC on the other end. This is a really good, elegant solution. So to get to the exact question, like for co-ops and munis and maybe some rural areas where there isn't three-phase power, a solution like this is actually quite good.
Dan, can I ask you a little bit about? I have a free wire charger a mile away, says Leonard.
Nice.
In Tulsa. Cool. Dan, can I ask you about fragmentation and making people talk to each other? And it's something that I see a lot in the EV industry. You know, you talked about thousands of utilities where you are. You know, we're a small island here, and we're split into 14 areas, of which 6 companies are in charge of delivering the power. They're network operators. They don't overlap. And then we have one national grid. So, you know, even that seems complicated. And you're talking about thousands of companies that, you know, the US is a different system. You know, those all need to make their own decisions, things like vehicle to grid. You know, this week there was a headline that I saw with BMW giving vehicle to grid cars to customers, opened it up and it was a trial of 20. And you're like, come on, Japan's been doing this forever. Everyone's doing a trial of vehicle to grid, has been for the last 10 or however many years. And it just seems there's so much opportunity, but there are so many moving parts to this. Now, in the past, a company like BMW would never have had a reason to have a deep relationship with a company like, you know, EDF, the French national energy company. Like, car companies and energy utilities might have had conversations and some projects, but they would never have been so deeply connected as they are now. But, you know, when we see it with the chargers as well, I've just been up at GridServe talking to the CEO there. They've got 36 or 38 of your wonderful ABB units. And he said, I won't name the car, but someone turns up with a car fresh off a boat, a particularly, you know, high performance car, I will say, plugged it in and it wouldn't charge. And so that's a case of the customer saying, well, your chargers are rubbish. And actually he has to get onto your engineers at ABB, and it could have been within days, maybe within hours. You're able to push out a patch simply because the car companies could have a deeper relationship with the hardware manufacturers as well. Like, that's just a few examples of all the moving parts in EVs. Is this part of your job as well, about how to just knock heads together and inspire conversations that people wouldn't have gone, oh, I need to talk to like that guy or girl over there? Oh, okay. Like, do you get involved in that?
So sometimes, yes. I certainly don't want to overstate my role in that. But I have had conversation. I'm going to start with that comment where we're working on. This is a good example. Is a fleet, right? And they want to purchase maybe 2 or 3 different OEMs of some kind, whether light duty, medium duty, even heavy duty, Class 8. And the conversation is, for the uninitiated, is all about how big, how fast can we charge these things? And my response is, well, it depends on how long your vehicle is going to be sitting there. It's use case, right? How long is it going to be sitting there? I used to say that your car is like your cat, right? It's asleep most of the time. And so that's when you're going to charge it. And so it's about the use case, but just as important, tell me who the manufacturer is. All right. Maybe we have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, but if you tell me who the manufacturer is, I can tell you if we've done interoperability with them. Interoperability is the term that we use. It means a lot of different things to different people. Okay. So there's vehicle interoperability. So just like you said, Martin, has the hardware manufacturer actually interface with the auto manufacturer? Have they done testing by plugging the things in and making sure they work? We do this long before the vehicles hit the street. So we have a long history of doing this with the auto manufacturers. One of the things that's critical to this, like you said, our engineers pushed out a fix on software or firmware to make that charger be able to work on the car. Smart charging is critical to this. And, so you guys will remember 2010, 11, 12, even 13 and longer, the big argument, especially in level 2 and some fast charge, was smart versus dumb. Like, I can reduce my capital expense by just installing dumb chargers. And if I need someone to fix it, no problem. It's not that expensive. Well, when you have 2 of them at your pizza parlor, it's not that expensive. When you have 5,000 of them distributed across a country, that's a lot of people in golf carts with clipboards. All right. And so you need these things to be connected. I want to remind me again of the first part of your question about all the different stakeholders.
How do you I was trying to kind of get across for people who are watching this that don't understand. Like, there are people having conversations with each other that wouldn't have previously needed to speak to each other. And like, utilities have, generally, and not everywhere, but some of them won't have been in the business of being a B2C operator. And actually, you need to talk to individuals and be, at household level. And they're like, oh, well, hang on a minute, we're just used to these kind of big things. And even making small companies talk to other small companies. It's like, it just seems frustrating when, a new car comes out and then the car manufacturer has added a last minute bit of code to it and then didn't tell anyone. And it's like, that's, as a non-Tesla owner, I look over at them. They make the cars, the software, the hardware. I'm not surprised it works most of the time. And it just seems there's so many moving. It almost seems an impossible situation if it wasn't for people like you having our backs.
So, I mean, we're working on it. You have commissions that are regulating the utility in power generation, transmission, delivery, that are now regulating transportation. And in some states, so 50 states, 50 commissions, and not a whole lot of federal oversight on utilities until you get into nuclear. But there's also there's the federal FERC, right? And I should know the acronym, right? Someone will know it, right? Something regulatory commission. At any rate, there are rules about, and you talked about vehicle to grid. So there's distributed energy resources that can connect to the grid, and they have to comply with rules. And there's some FERC rules about that. We need that for vehicle to grid. We need a federal suite of policies. And as soon as I say regulation, then people are going to start freaking out, right? But thank you, FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Thank you, somebody. And we need some kind of blanket policy. And that's important because there are 3,200 utilities in the U.S. And if every single one of them came up with different, complicated rules, which is the way it works now, then it's going to be difficult. So the utilities today are the oil fields of tomorrow. Okay, they are generating and sending the fuel everywhere. They're now in the transportation business. And this is something that is new to that industry. And so the commissions have been wrestling with what their roles are in allowing the utilities to do this, in things like road taxes. Who's going to pay the gas tax when there's no gas? And that's a real problem. But it's not something that should be like a fee, for example, tacked onto every EV owner that dampens the adoption of electric vehicles. That's not a solution today. So there's the conversations I have all the time when I talk to utility folks, Martin, are about how do we approach this transportation electrification. And most every utility has a transportation electrification person on staff now, or they've hired a consultant. Some of them have entire departments now, especially in California and some of the other places, and teams that are coming either out of solar or distributed energy or the innovation division of the company. And this is definitely on the rise. So it's good news that this is happening. And when I go to conferences and I speak to people, those are the folks that I'm talking to. But you can't forget about your distribution and transmission engineers, because they have to be able to plan what's coming. So you really have so talk about just internal to the utility. The innovation people have to talk to distribution and transmission, right? Depending on how the utility is built. And then the automotive industry has to talk to the utilities. And they have to talk to the folks that are, everybody in the value chain of this new, fueling system that is upon us. And it's a multi-headed, monster, right? It's what is that? The Hydra, the microbe with the multiple heads on it that you studied in biology, right?
Look, Dan, this is the first time you brought up Greek mythology on this podcast, and I think it'll be the last. I suspect it'll be the last.
Oh no! Somebody has created a charger somewhere that looks like Medusa.
Well, there you go. We'll find a picture.
So your question is long and complicated, but yeah, the stakeholder engagement in the process of transmission, distribution, consumption of this fuel has stakeholders that haven't had to work together before. Utilities, automotive, transportation, these things all need to come together, and they are. I mean, they are all working together, and as you guys have been in this for years, right? A decade or more, and talk about it every day. Car sales in the US, maybe 2.5%, right?
Right.
There's the things that you all and that we take for granted as topics that are like what you might call EV 101. The rest of the population is like, right. I could get an electric car. Now, the F-150, right? Kind of a tipping point vehicle, right? I'm getting a little off target.
Right. No,
jump ahead.
Fine. Yeah.
But,
there's a lot of tipping points coming.
Yeah. So that's, and I've maintained for a long time. Like I used to kid around with some of my friends. I'm like, when Ford makes an electric 150, that's it. That's game over. And the other thing is the Pacifica hybrid, right? Minivan, right? So a plug-in minivan. You got the belly of America here, the minivan and the pickup truck. Martin, is it like that in the UK? Are those the vehicles of choice? Like,
no, I mean, it's fascinating that we don't have truck culture here. So, we have small city car culture, and the roads are smaller and everything. We're a small, you can drive from the very bottom to the top of our country, from Land's End to John O'Groats in 830 miles. We're a small island, really.
Right.
So we don't have
a cyclist I follow on Instagram just made that ride.
5 minutes. You can go to top to bottom, no worries.
Right, and then you get the ride across America, which is 3,000 miles.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, it's very different. But you could have given us the most perfect segue to talk about the Ford F-150 now.
Just about, yeah. But before we get that, I just wanted to also hit. I wanted to also just like looking at it from a consumer perspective. Like, for instance, we have a JKEV is asking, do you think the biggest reason I can't drive my VW across the Dakotas or Wyoming is utilization, or is it a utility problem as well? So like looking at this from just a retail perspective, like the average consumer, they want to know, can they buy an electric car? Will they be able to charge it when they buy it? After they buy it, if they're between cities somewhere, they don't want to be stranded. They don't have to worry about reliability. They don't want to have to worry about all this back end stuff that with utilities. Are we going to be prepared with the coming wave of electric vehicles? Like there's Mercedes has just announced that they're going to be all electric by 2030. And that's like right in the timeline with everybody. So that's a short period of time for huge changes to happen.
So let me, I want to answer that question. Wyoming, Dakotas, driving across. I believe you could do it in a Tesla today.
Tesla, you can do it, but not CCS.
Yeah.
Right.
Is it about utilization? It's about cars. So how many cars have been sold in those areas? Now, I know this is I'm going from San Francisco to Massachusetts on I-90 or something like that, right?
Right.
It's not about I live in Cheyenne and I'm going to drive an electric car yet, okay? But you do have to take those things into consideration. So the specter of 1% utilization on something that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars is a big issue. That is one of the reasons why there are gaps in these corridors in the U.S. Okay, there's a slew of states. I think it's now 14, maybe 15, called ZEV, zero emission vehicle states. Right. This is where it's financially better for the vehicle manufacturers to sell the cars in those states. there's more incentive. And those states are not Wyoming, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Those are Oregon, California, I think Massachusetts, New York, Colorado. There's 13 or 14, maybe even 15 of them now. And those, I would say, would be the usual suspects in the higher urban areas where you might find higher innovation in electric vehicle adoption, early adopters, things like that. So, if electrification had happened at John Deere and Caterpillar before it happened at Nissan and Chevy, this would be a different story.
Right.
So that's what's happening. It's the vehicles aren't there, and that in turn would mean that a high investment in these charging plazas would be a low return. And a utility has to think of all ratepayers, by the way. So whether it's an investor-owned utility or a muni or a co-op, where you have shareholders and members, they have to think about their investment being the best thing for all of their constituents. And that would be a very hard thing to go to your membership and say, we're going to spend this on the chance that a couple cars might show up on Labor Day weekend.
Right.
So,
well, that hits home.
I can segue you back into the F-150 because what I will say is a week after that announcement, within 2 weeks, I will say, I had incoming inquiries from utilities in those geographies saying, we need to figure out how to do this because this is happening.
Right.
Amazing.
Okay, that's a important clue. So utilities are cluing in, and that's what, like, one of the first steps that needs to happen is like the utilities in these out of the way
rural environments,
right? They have to get involved and be ready for this change to happen. Basically, that's like step one. Right on.
Because like Dan was saying, look, I'm the next town down from Cheyenne. I live this world. I need a Tesla to drive an electric car up into Wyoming to get up to Montana. There's no way I could take an ID4, Mach-E, Ioniq 5, Lucid Air, maybe with that much range. Maybe, I don't know. It's an interesting thing, and I think the point of getting utilities involved is a topic we don't focus on enough. We focus a lot on network providers that are providing a countrywide build out, EVgo, Electrify America, etc. And so having these little utility projects, I'd love to dig into that when we have more time and look at the financials, because I can't wait until the day where Tom and I get together and there's a free market business approach to DC fast charging for the private consumer or private entities, but we're just not there yet.
Right. Hey, so I know Tom's like just busting to talk about this Ford F-150 Lightning, but I just want to mention that just to segue into it, or not quite, but I just want to mention that Elon Musk tweeted out this week that the Tesla superchargers would be open to EVs from other brands before the end of the year. Not much more info than that, really. I imagine they'll install CCS connectors to them like they have in Europe, and they'll probably charge, I guess, more for the privilege for non-Tesla owners.
They better.
Right.
He did say this in 2016 as well, and 2017 and 2018, and
it'll be news when it happens.
Exactly.
It could be tomorrow, and I think it'll be never. And actually, we have some rules over here where if you want to operate a public fast charging network, you've got to do things like have a contactless reader on the front so people can pay with their bank card. You've got to have a screen so that people can see there's just, the state of charge. There's just, and Tesla aren't going to do that. So we would never get it. But there's just so many.
It would have to be through the app or something. Through an app.
They'd have to change the regulations to then, make it app based. Or there's a bunch of reasons why this won't happen.
Right. Well,
you can play that back when it does happen and say, "You idiot!"
Right. So that's like 5 months to get it done. So we'll see.
It won't happen.
Okay.
They're building a Cybertruck.
You heard it here first, folks.
Right. When was the Tesla Semi supposed to hit the road again? Let's get that project done first.
Actually, I heard it's under. I think production has begun. There's rumors that it has. There's nothing official yet, but
look, it's not official till a consumer can pick it up and they're driving it.
That's right.
But I will add that I believe it's going to happen at some point. I don't think it's going to fully happen in 2021, but at some point, Tesla is going to open up the supercharger network. It's such an asset. It's going to help them make a tremendous amount of money. It'll help the supercharger network pay for itself. It's right now, We talked about demand charges before. Like, Dan, I can't even imagine what the supercharger network costs Tesla in demand charges. It's staggering. I don't think people realize that. I think, every time you plug into a supercharger, Tesla's losing a lot of money every time. And think of all the people charging. So they have to do something to make it sustainable, and opening it up to other vehicles and charging them, say, double what Tesla pays is going to be something that's going to happen. I don't know when, but it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, I don't. Hey Dan, what do you think of that possibility, or what the big challenge is there for you? Do you think for Tesla to open up its?
Oh, there's a couple of different ways you can look at that. Is it competition? Yes, but we are still so early in this that
Right.
The more the better, right? If they were able to do it right and get CCS connectors on those, and then it just means that more people are going to say, now I can really buy an electric car. I mean, that I don't see how that's a bad thing. And,
Right.
and remember the VW, award of $2 billion in the US a few years ago, where all of the settlement money is going down to the States and building things and electrify America. Me personally, when that happened at $2 billion, I really thought that was an existential threat to half the companies in the business.
Oh, really?
Nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
It's in the tens of billions of investment that is needed. And so if all of a sudden the Tesla superchargers became open to CCS drivers, and then good, we've hit another milestone and we can keep on going.
There's a big shoe that needs to be filled, so to speak, right, to replace like our current energy charging infrastructure. Like instead of gasoline, all that energy has to come through electricity, and this is a huge task.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's talk about what we've been driving. Kyle, I know you haven't had anything I don't think you have had anything this week, but I did want to mention that your videos you did for the Out of Spec Reviews channel, featuring your mom, who is.
Oh yeah, we had cars this week that I can't tell you about, so you'll have to wait till later for that. We did a whole family series. So part of this Formula E trip, I'm from the East Coast, New Yorker, just like Dan, and decided to film a series interviewing my family about electric cars that they own, from ID4 to Model Y. Today, another video went up. My dad just took delivery of his Volkswagen ID4. That video is now live.
Nice.
So we have 6 of these things in the family now. But it was exciting. I got to interview Alyssa's 86-year-old grandfather about what it's like to live with an electric car. Her mom, who knows not even how to power on her cell phone.
My mom,
video. Yeah, that did well, and people loved it. And my mom with her Tesla Model Y, and now my dad with his new Volkswagen ID4. And great series. Well, I'm trying to do more daily uploads, shorter, higher, sort of hit rate on content, and of course trying to get an electric flair. But of course, you have to understand we still do combustion cars on the Out of Spec Reviews channel, but we'll keep it 50-50.
All right. So Tom has had a pretty special week. Not only did he drive the Jeep Wrangler 4xe, the plug-in hybrid, that he did a 70-mile-an-hour range test with, but he also spent the day at Ford talking about electrification and the Ford F-150 Lightning. And you can see him here if you're watching us on YouTube or Twitch, standing beside a partially assembled Ford F-150 Lightning with camo on the hood. That's kind of a
Tom, did you help build that car? Because if so, I want to track the warranty claims. They're going to be through the roof.
That was my workshop for the day. I built the frunk, so the power frunk. It was a lot of fun.
Is it ultra mega power frunk or something?
Yeah, I lose track of all these. Ford's got a million names, but their new charging pro and the ultra mega power frunk and the intelligent backup power. I can't remember all the names they have, but they're doing some really good things there.
So where exactly at Ford were you?
I was all over, actually. This picture here is at the Rouge Electric Vehicle Center. That's going to be where they're building the F-150 Lightning. That's a new center, 500,000 square feet, which isn't enormous when you consider Ford has some manufacturing facilities that are in the millions of square feet. But what they told me, it wasn't that they're making this smaller because they don't plan on making a lot of F-150 Lightnings, or that they'll need to. It's just that with modern design, they can get something that used to take them, over 1 million square feet and crunch it down into 500,000 square feet and still produce the same amount of vehicles. So it's really cool. There's no like assembly line. You see those electric vehicle transporters that cab of the Lightning is on. So there's magnetic strips going up and down the factory line, and those things transport the vehicles. They have these hydraulic lifts, and they lift the vehicle up to the point that the person working on them doesn't have to bend. So as the vehicle goes down the assembly line, it's getting lifted and lowered depending on what that next person is working on. It's really cool. I mean, so totally automated. It's very early on, as you can see. The whole room kind of looks empty, but they had a couple Lightnings there on these automated vehicle carriers for us to take a look at.
How are those powered?
They're electric, and there are built into the floor, which I'm going to have a video up on Inside EVs in a while. They have inductive charging pads. So as this thing drives down the line, it's also charging the batteries.
Nice.
So it's really, totally futuristic, so cool. Great manufacturing facility. But we're going to have a full YouTube video up on Inside EVs on my day there yesterday. It was really good experience.
So how far out are they from building these things there?
I think they're supposed to start building them in the spring, sometime in the spring to the summer of next year is when the vehicle is going to be available to purchase. So they're only a matter of 8 months away or so from having this facility completely built out.
And here we see, if you're watching on YouTube or Twitch, the Ford F-150 Lightning at the Ford Product Review Center. So is this where you got to drive it, or where did you ride it? Tell us about that part.
So I didn't get to drive the vehicle. I don't think anybody has really driven it yet, as far as I know, except President Biden. Exactly. But the cool thing was I had Darren Palmer, the general manager of battery electric vehicles for Ford, as my driver. And
nice.
We went around their proving track, 6 or 7 times. Darren really drove the heck out of it. Nice. And let me tell you guys, I was impressed. One of the cool things about doing, both. One of the cool things that we get to do here, working with Inside EVs and Kyle with Out of Spec, is get to drive in or drive every electric vehicle that's on the market before they're available. This is a pickup truck. Now we know it's fast. It's 775 pound-feet of torque. So it's going to have a lot of power, but being in it and feeling the power was another thing. I was incredibly impressed at this power. And I'm talking 70 miles an hour. Punch it, you get thrown back in your seat. The feeling that I feel when I step on my Model 3 at 30 miles an hour.
Okay.
I mean, incredible torque. And that 70 to 95 miles an hour happened in like a snap. I mean, this thing, we're going to be seeing these on the drag strips, on doing the quarter-mile runs all the time when these things when these things hit. I mean, it's not going to beat a Model S Plaid, but people are going to be so excited about the performance of this vehicle that it's really. I knew it was going to be powerful, like I said, but sitting in it and feeling that torque at any speed when he stomped on it, we were just like,
nice.
I'm telling you guys, people are going to love this truck.
It's funny. People pay a lot of, usually, we've paid a lot extra for that kind of performance, but with electric vehicles, maybe you're paying a little extra now, but, usually most electric vehicles have that sort of extra power, built right into it. So it's, just coming along for the ride.
Yeah. Not most electric vehicles do not feel like this, Tom. they have that instant torque and this is next level. This is like, you shouldn't get this in a pickup truck. That's, it's going to do 0 to 60 in the low 4s, I think. So that's as fast as my dual motor Model 3.
Right.
Yeah, so I took a couple shots. What I tried to get was the pictures of the system that's going to have the scale to weigh the cargo in the bed, and then also they have a really cool system. They're still working on, obviously, about the smart hitch and towing, where you get to put in all kind of information about the trailer that you're pulling, the length, the type of trailer, like the aerodynamics of it, and then you can save it in your in the system. So if you have multiple trailers, when you get in the car, you tell the vehicle which trailer you're using, and it will you set your nav system, and it's going to take into consideration the aerodynamics, the weight, everything, the topography of your trip, and they're Ford is saying that they're going to really nail this with the range estimator. That in their testing that they've done so far, they're plus or minus 5%. That's how close they're getting. Pulling a trailer, up and down, mountainous roads, and so they know that trailering with pickup trucks, electric pickup trucks, is going to be a challenge with the range. So the next best thing that they can do, other than putting in a 500 kilowatt hour battery pack, is give the customers confidence that the range estimator is going to be correct. It's going to tell you if you can make it or not. If you can't, then you could figure out where you have to stop and charge. So the worst thing they could do is have this thing where it tells somebody they're starting their trip and it's, 200 miles, you'll make it. And then, 80 miles in, you've got 30 miles left on your range. So, they're really working hard to have the system so that people will have confidence in the range estimator.
So speaking
can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes. I don't know why. I mean, I'm sure that they thought of this, but is it counterproductive to put like a backup battery in whatever you're towing?
So, I mean, yeah, I've seen early on with electric vehicles, somebody came out with that, and it was called the Long Ranger. It was like a mini trailer with a battery pack. And Dan, the thing about that is now that extra weight that you're hauling around, I mean, you're going to lose range because of that. And I guess you would gain. You could put in a gas generator if you want in the back, and then pull off to the side of the road and charge the vehicle. I think infrastructure has to be the role there, more so than you carrying a big battery. And,
I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of range, did you get to ask him? So the Ford F-150 Lightning has a 300-mile range with the big pack. So there was some rumors that range was with 1,000 pounds of payload in the back, and I don't believe that's the case. But did he happen to mention that?
So I did, yeah, and that's when Darren really dove into how they're going to work so hard to have people rely on the range estimator. It's clearly a topic that they don't really want to talk about. I tried to get that out of him. I didn't. But I will say that, I really fiddled around with the infotainment system. And the interesting thing is it seemed like they had it set up so that the estimated range wasn't on the driver's display like it normally would be. I think they didn't want people taking pictures of what the vehicle range says. But I went through a lot of screens and I found something that showed estimated range, and I'm not going to talk about it. It was more than 300, but that doesn't mean that. No, that's miles on the car. Yeah, and it was more than 300, and I don't want to burn any bridges with Ford, so I'll just say it was a lot more than what they're saying. But that just could be because this is pre-production software. We weren't allowed to film in the vehicle anything with the software because they're still working on this. It's like I said, nearly a year away from launching. But I was a little surprised when I saw what the range estimator said inside that infotainment system buried in one of the screens.
It looks pretty good. It looks quite fully baked. I mean, did it feel like a production car, or how did it feel inside it?
It actually did. It was snappy. It was responsive. But as I said, they were super, protective of us filming and recording the screen, especially I wasn't allowed to film anything while we were driving inside the vehicle. I couldn't set up GoPros or anything like that. We weren't even allowed to film anything on the test track because there were other vehicles whizzing by that are,
Right.
vehicles that nobody's seen yet. So we unfortunately I couldn't get any moving video of the car. But with the range, that they really wouldn't go into that. They weren't touching that subject. But everything Ford's done, even with the Mach-E, it seems like they kept adding. We talked about this before. They set us a level of expectations, and then as the vehicle moves closer and closer to launch, they're like, oh yeah, and it does this, and oh yeah, you'll get this. And Ford's done that really well with the Mach-E, and I think they'll do that with the with the F-150 Lightning. I asked in a million ways to try to trick them to tell me battery size and range, and even because we talked to the electric vehicle charging experts, and I talked about how the intelligent backup system can power your house for up to 3 days. So I asked, well, is there a limit on how much energy it will allow you to deliver? Like, will it stop at 25%? So you don't start running your house and all of a sudden your battery's down below zero. And I couldn't get them to give me a percentage where you can't charge past, because then we could do the math and with how much they're saying it'll power your home. So they were really smart and guarded with that.
Well, maybe if we get Darren on the podcast, we can figure out a way to trick him.
I want to mention that. So Darren said that he's a huge fan of the podcast and watches it, and a lot of. We get to interview a lot of executives from a lot of companies, and they all say, oh, we're a fan of you on Inside EVs and so forth. And you don't really know if they are or not, but he is, because we were talking about things and he knew things that we talked about on the podcast. He mentioned how Kyle and I have been hard on Ford for the charging curve on the Mustang Mach-E, and said that, we know that, we're working on some things right now, and
can we talk about that specific thing? Charging curve, or about it being,
real quick before we do that, Dan has to jump off. So Dan, thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure, guys. I really had a great time. I loved hearing you guys talk. There's lots of things to chat about, and I look forward to tuning into other shows and seeing what you're all talking about and what you're driving.
Right on. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks,
man.
All right.
Thanks for joining.
Yep.
All right.
So I see really quick, there's a lot of questions about how big is the F-150 pack. We don't know yet. Ford has not announced it. We're figuring somewhere between, there's a standard range pack and an extended range pack, just like the Mustang Mach-E. We're figuring somewhere around, a little over 120 kilowatt hour, I think, for the standard range pack, and maybe close to around 150 for the extended range pack kilowatt hour. But that hasn't been announced yet.
Right. Okay. So just jumping back for a second, the Ford Mustang Mach-E charging curve. Can you say anything about that being fixed?
They're working on it. That's all I can say is that they're Darren said that, they're constantly analyzing data, and, there are things that they can change with over-the-air updates. So we said, we want to provide the best charging experience we can for Mach-E owners, and, where we can make improvements, we will.
Yeah, well, look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to call that we're going to fix the Mach-E charging curve and we'll see it better. They told me the same thing before the cars went on sale, and many other little points. So look, I love the team over at Ford. The people there are amazing. Have become friends with them. They're great. The cars overall, a fantastic package, but there are some really big engineering decisions that I can't agree with. Up to this point, it sounds like he can't either, because they're admitting to wanting to fix it. So, at the end of the day, once you fix it, send us a car. I'm so excited to give a glowing charging review. But as everyone, from almost every automaker knows, we do all the charging testing here and cannot give it a stamp of approval yet until it happens on a production car. Don't send us a prototype. Not interested. Send us one that someone can buy.
All right. So, but there could be an OTA coming for Mustang Mach-E owners. That would, I guess, that would decrease the time it takes to fast charge to 80%.
I would say, yeah, it has to happen, and it needs to be OTA, because when we got our blue car with EB Dave, there were some things that couldn't be done OTA, and we basically just determined we'll just wait till we get the updates from everyone else.
Right. All right. So Tom, you've also had the Jeep 4xe Wrangler, and you did a 70-mile-an-hour range test. That's a plug-in hybrid. How big is the battery, and tell us about your ride?
Sure. Yeah. So I have the Jeep 4xe for a week. It's got a 17 kilowatt hour battery. I think it's 17.3 kilowatt hour total. Usable capacity, Jeep's never released or announced, but it's about 15 kilowatt hour because I've charged it a bunch of times from zero. And at the end of the charging, it's always like 15.3, 15.5 kilowatt hour that I've pumped into the battery. And there's some charging losses. So it's fair to say it's about 15 kilowatt hour usable. So yeah, I charged it up and hopped out on the highway, and I drove 22.2 miles before the motor kicked in for good. Now I say for good because I wasn't able to even get the full 22.2 at around, I think it was around 19 miles. I started going up and a slight incline. It wasn't even a steep hill, and to hold 70 miles an hour, of course, I had to give it a little bit more juice. And the hybrid motor kicked in only for 0.2 of a mile. And then like a mile later, the thing happened again for 0.2 of a mile. So we finished up with the battery was completely depleted at 22.2 miles. And I deduct the 0.4 of a mile I drove in hybrid mode and said 21.8. Now, some people might not be happy with that and say, oh, when the hybrid mode kicked on first time, that's the end of the range. Take it however you want it. It's EPA range rated at 21 miles per charge, and at 70 miles an hour, you can get 21 miles per charge out of it. So I did as much as 30 miles on a single charge just driving around town. Right. So every time I recharged it, it was somewhere between 25 and 28 miles per charge. And in good weather, it's the warm weather here now, it's the summer, I think you'll easily beat the EPA range rating. The interesting thing that I found is that, and Kyle and I talk about this a lot when we drive the plug-in hybrids, is that it's we like when there is an artificial wall in the accelerator pedal travel where you can depress it to a certain point, and then there's resistance, and you can tell if you keep pushing, you're going to kick on the ICE engine. This doesn't have that. There's no point where okay, if I go any further, I'm going to jump the vehicle into hybrid mode from all electric mode. So total
fail.
Yeah, that's something that I'm not happy with at all driving the vehicle. And it became really apparent on this 70 mile an hour range test. As I'm driving, it surprised me that the engine kicked on. I still had like 10 or 12% of battery left, and I only gave it a little bit. It's not like I stomped on it. I was just trying to maintain that 70 miles an hour. But around town, I'm averaging. They're actually going to come pick it up now. I had a Friday to Friday loan, and I averaged over 30 miles an hour and I drove it 800 miles this week, including a long round trip to Atlantic City, which was all in hybrid mode. Only the first 25 miles was on battery or so. So I averaged over 30 miles an hour. And, considering that most of the Jeeps average
you mean
in the
miles
low
per
20s.
Gallon or miles per hour?
Miles per gallon. Did I say miles per hour?
Nice.
Oh, geez.
It's your old
I'm losing
age,
it.
don't worry.
I'm losing it. I only got a couple hours sleep. I got home really late last night from my trip to Detroit.
Right.
So yeah. I averaged over 30 miles per gallon, and that's if you can drive this and plug it in frequently, if you just plug it in overnight and then you drive all day 60, 70 miles and you just use it use the battery fully charged once, I don't know if you can make the case for the savings. But the vehicle will charge quickly. It has a 7.7 kilowatt hour onboard charger.
That's nice.
So it fully recharges in 2 hours. Nice. So, I'll go out and drive 10, 15 miles, come home, plug it in. I'm back to full in an hour. So there were many days that I drove at 60, 70 miles all on battery for that day. If you use it that way, I think you could make the economic case for it that it makes sense. But if you're just going to charge it overnight, you're probably not going to come out ahead financially. But you do get the extra performance because it is the most powerful Jeep. other than the top of the line V8 Jeep, or
Yeah,
there's
the
like 7 different.
492.
Yeah, exactly. Other than that version, it's more powerful. It has more horsepower, more torque, faster quarter mile and there's like 7 different versions of the Jeep Wrangler.
So what was the sticker on yours?
You had
The
the
sticker
Sahara.
on mine, I had the Sahara. It was like 55 and change.
So here's where it makes sense.
Wow.
This is the cheapest Wrangler to lease.
Okay.
Yep. So
Probably
people are ending up with them, and they had no idea they were even plugins. I've seen tons of posts about this. They're just like, I want the cheapest lease on a Wrangler, and it's the plug-in hybrid.
That's the worst way. The worst way to drive one of these cars is not to plug it in and be an active participant in charging.
They just want the credits. They just want the credits.
If you just take this car and never plug it in, it's the worst way to own a plug-in hybrid. And
that'd be dumb.
Nothing's stopping you doing that. You're doing nothing wrong. But if you're just going to carry around a bunch, like a bunch of batteries
but if it's cheaper and it gets okay fuel economy, go for it. Whatever.
It doesn't get okay fuel economy. Other than the 392 V8, it gets the worst fuel economy.
Didn't you just say you got 30 mpg?
By plugging it in.
Oh, I thought you said on your big trip and you only
No. That's my average over 800 miles for the week, and that bakes in the all-electric miles. Driving in just hybrid mode, it's EPA range rated at 20 miles per gallon.
Most of the Jeeps brick and it's way up in the air,
but the other Jeeps, Dom, like this has the turbo 4-cylinder in it.
Right.
The turbo 4-cylinder, just straight out gas version, gets much better gas mileage than this because it's not lugging around. It's not lugging around the battery. It weighs a lot more. I mean, it's a fun vehicle. It's a Jeep. It's funny. The 2 days that it rains, water's pouring in from the driver's side window on the top.
It's a Jeep.
It's a Jeep. It drove pretty well. I think it was less bouncy than some of the other Jeeps I drove. I think because of the weight.
Okay.
I just don't think you could choose a worse road trip vehicle than this. Thankfully, you had a hardtop. My sister has the mild hybrid 4-cylinder turbo. I'm actually going to take it for a few months because we just ordered her a new car and her lease isn't up. So I'm going to take it for comparison videos with the 4xe and everything. So you'll see me rolling around. And it is the worst possible thing to put on the highway. It feels like it's just going to blow over. The roof feels like it's going to come off. She has like a $5,000 convertible top option that's just a piece of garbage. And look, great off-road. I can't wait to take this to Moab when I get ours and see if we can off-road in electric mode.
Hey Tom, does the 4xe come in a 2-door version as well? Because
no.
Oh really?
4-door only.
A real Jeep?
Yeah, 4-door only.
Oh man,
they probably need the rim.
The least expensive version is $50,000, like 49 and change. The starting MSRP.
Okay. Hey, so we got to move on. We got at least one more story we need to talk about for sure. So anything else you want to add about that?
No, that's it. I'm going to have more. I'm going to have an overall review video coming up on the Jeep and also some charging videos coming up on the Jeep.
All right. So Mercedes has decided to lean heavier into electrification. It's investing $47 billion between next year and 2030 to finance a comprehensive plan. That is, of course, a pretty serious stack of cash. And speaking of cash, they're probably going to simultaneously stick to their profitability targets. So this should be quite a challenge for them. So from 2025 onwards, all new architecture will be electric only and completely all electric by the end of the decade. They did add a small proviso here where market conditions allow. So there could be some markets without the necessary infrastructure where they might continue to sell ICE vehicles for a while, but I wouldn't count on that too much. Still, though, that's as aggressive a target as any of the traditional OEMs has announced, and more aggressive than most. So it will launch 3 separate platforms in 2025. MB-EA will be a scalable modular system serving as the electric backbone for the future EV portfolio. It will cover all medium to large passenger cars. AMG-EA will be a dedicated performance electric vehicle platform targeting technology and performance-oriented Mercedes-AMG customers. And Van.EA will underpin purpose-made electric vans and light commercial vehicles. So that's that part of it. Interestingly, it has also acquired YASA, which makes pancake-style axial flux electric motors and controllers. They were spun out of Oxford University back in 2009 and have been used in a ton of interesting and unique vehicles over the years, like the Ecotricity Ion Horse electric motorcycle, and more recently the Ford Mustang Mach-E 1400 has about like 7 of them in it. So, of course, batteries are a big part of every electrification plan. And Mercedes is looking to set up 8 new factories with partners, supplying over 200 gigawatt hours. That would be enough for 2 million 100 kilowatt hour packs. So, yeah, a lot of cars. For its next battery generation, it'll be highly standardized to go into about 90% of its vehicles. The cells will be standardized, and it'll be working with partners like Sila Nano to further increase energy density by using silicone carbon composite in the anodes. And it's also, of course, looking at solid state cells further down the road. So to show the world that it means business, Mercedes is currently developing the Vision EQXX. And you can see it on your screen here on their cover. That's an EV with a real-world range of more than 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles. During its debut in 2022, this concept is debuting in 2022 as a concept. And it's targeting a single-digit figure for kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So that would be over 6 miles per kilowatt hour at typical normal highway driving speeds too. So that's like crazy efficient. It seems like this won't be a vehicle that makes it into production, of course. But some of the technological advances made with the Vision EQXX will find their ways into the platforms coming in 2025. Mercedes did, though, tease a concept that will come to production. So take a look at the back corner of this Mercedes Maybach EQS SUV. Let's bring it up here on the screen, and it's coming. Oh, there it is. Yes, it already looks better than the EQS. Right. So, right. Besides all that, they also confirmed that there would be an electric G-Wagon in 2024, which will most likely be named the EQG. So I don't know, Kyle, are you impressed with any of that?
Will be when I see it. Sounds awesome. Sounds really good on paper. But at the end of the day, are the cars going to do well? We don't even know. We don't even have the first fully electric Mercedes model. I own the closest thing to it in this country, which is the Smart Electric Drive. I own the last generation of this, basically.
B250.
And yeah, okay, B250, sure, but mine's still more modern. My Smart was sold after B250. Anyway, we haven't seen anything like with this new architecture. We don't have EQA, we don't have EQC. I'll be in Europe again in September, going to test those cars, of course.
Europe has EQC, right?
EQA and C on sale.
Right.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we'll see if our market adapts to it. I put up a couple of EQS videos, and to be totally transparent, thanks for Mercedes for getting us early access. Our audience hated it. I mean, overwhelmingly hated the design. Not one person said it looked good. I said it looked good in the video. I was like, this looks good in person. Pretty amazing. No one liked it. So if no one likes your flagship, who's going to like the cars that come after? I don't know. I am concerned for the future of Mercedes. No doubt the technical ability of the cars will be amazing. Hopefully the charging is really good. Hopefully the range. But if you can't get people to emotionally buy in, you're off to a bad start. Rivian has the opposite problem. Huge buy-in from a styling and branding perspective. Do they have the technology to back it up? Honestly, we don't know. We've never tested a Rivian vehicle. We know Mercedes are at least, one of the highest quality automakers for the longest time. So we have like a complete opposite situation going on, and hard to say if they'll succeed and do well. I think putting in that caveat of when, countries don't have infrastructure built out, our country qualifies under that, by the way. America is one of those countries. And it will in the future too. You're not going to be able to sell in Canada fully electric vehicles to get around everywhere. In the US, you're not going to be able to just remove all combustion vehicles, I think, for a long time, especially here in the center. Maybe you can have an 80% electric market share, and then you need a couple combustion models for weird use cases. I think they needed that caveat. That's their out. This sounds great on paper, and it doesn't mean anything in the real world until they do it.
Tom, just taking a look at that picture of the back corner of the EQS SUV, do you think that will, there's more hope for an emotional connection with that design?
Well, is that the production version? Is that the concept?
That's the Maybach.
Yeah, it's basically a GLS.
Yeah. I mean, that looks cool, but you know what? The EQS looked awesome too when we first saw, silhouettes of it.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I think that looks cool. And I like the news about that Mercedes news that I like the most that came out of this is the dedicated platforms that they, are going to be across the board making dedicated platforms. We know that just you get a better electric vehicle when you use dedicated platform for electrification. Everything else, we're getting a little tired of this constant. By 2025, we'll have 35 models. By 2030, there's no more, ICE models. Like Kyle says, produce, this is all just talk now, which is great. And I know the companies have to do it. They have to come out and make statements like this, but let's see what actually happens. And to me, they didn't even need that out that where markets, conditions, because, they could just come up with that, later and say, hey, we'd love to be building these cars, but there's no charging stations. We'll see. Overall, I think it's good news, but I'm not getting excited about it.
Okay. Interesting. It's a big pile of cash. So it's like $47 billion, I think it was, compared
a huge amount of money.
And compared, that's like right up there with the GM's like $35 billion to 2025.
Dominic, you know what it is though? It's just a game as to who can act like they're spending the most amount of money on this electrification trend to get the headlines, but they're not saying if they're going to spend the money wisely. How many dinners does that include? How many unnecessarily travel visits does that include? Right? Sorry, the dog's
That's
going
okay.
crazy. Yeah, he's such a good dog. I'd rather someone say, look, we are going to spend open checkbook, but we're going to spend it as wisely as possible in the areas that matter to make a really cohesive electric fleet, not just throw money at the problem and take everyone out for big dinners and fly people all over the world for a 10-second meeting.
I'm not sure. Simon Matthews asks who buys a Mercedes for the looks.
Almost everyone.
Yeah.
This is the reason you buy one.
Right. Well, I think a lot of people would just buy it for the prestige, for the, regardless of what it looked like. It has says Mercedes on it. So that's what they're supposed to be driving because they're at a certain place in their life or whatever.
We've learned that's not true because the GLA flopped. If people bought it just for the prestige, the GLA would have continued with the same first generation platform that they did, making it cheap and inexpensive. They had to bring that car up market because people weren't going to accept just the nameplate. So it has to back it up with styling.
Right. Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm in a Mercedes right now, by the way. I'm sitting in a Mercedes and I bought it because it looked cool. No, I didn't. I bought it because it's a house.
All right. So let's move on real quick. Anything else to add about the Mercedes thing? Okay, we're good there. So
just hope they do it well.
Right. We're getting low on time. So Rivian Automotive plans to build a second U.S. assembly plant that will also include battery cell production, eventually 50 gigawatt hours worth. But in built in phases, it won't be like 50 gigawatts all at once. So Rivian is exploring locations now for Project Terra. I wouldn't be surprised if they've already found one. They just haven't announced it yet. But they're looking for like 2,000 acres to set up this new factory on. Already they're in like Normal, Illinois. They have one factory that's supposed to be online and shipping out cars by now, but we'll get to that in a moment. The location and other details should be officially announced in a couple months and then break ground early next year. Samsung SDI is their current battery supplier, and there is some speculation that they may partner with them more closely, like a Tesla and Panasonic or GM and LG. But yeah, so that was kind of big Rivian news this week, as well as the less happy Rivian news that
they launched this because of this news. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, well, Reuters kind of dug that out of them, I think, and put it out there. I'm not sure if that was really their plan to announce this right away, unless they leaked it to Reuters to have them. Who knows? I guess that's a possibility as well.
They needed some good news out there, Don.
Yeah. So yeah, Rivian is delaying first deliveries of the R1T and R1S, the pickup truck and SUV, until September this time. So yeah, that's kind of a big disappointment. It's not supposed to affect the electric vans for Amazon, their rollout. I'm not exactly sure what the timeline is on that exactly, but
No, it's not a great deal of vans. You know, it's 100,000 vans over a decade. So,
right.
you know, the big number sounds impressive. 100,000 vans for Amazon. Yeah, until between now and 2030. And that we don't know whether that curve is linear, whether it's stacked towards the end of the decade. So, I don't think they're under a huge amount of pressure. That you can coach build and hand build. You know, and plenty of companies do small, interesting runs of electric things.
Right.
So. But the Rivian thing did get a bit of a boost because it shuttled Bezos and his pals to space.
Oh, that's true.
So you know, maybe that's where all the vehicles went. Maybe they had some, and Jeff said, "I need them. I need them for to come and rescue us when we touch down."
3 months worth of production. We're going to stagger them everywhere.
Yeah, but they looked cool. If anyone didn't, if you didn't see
cool.
It was. I wouldn't say that they were kind of hooning across the desert, but this 3 minutes of weightlessness that Jeff Bezos had in space, and they touched down in the desert. They didn't know where in the desert he was going to land. Obviously, you kind of know where he's going to land, but then when he sort of plopped back down to Earth and the parachutes come out, they were kind of on standby. So it took several minutes, and obviously they were in a hurry to make sure that their billionaire boss was okay, and they were giving these R1Ts a good thrashing across the desert to get there and to get to the capsule.
I missed that footage.
Yeah, and they weren't taking it easy. These weren't sort of delicate trucks that were just there for the photo op on smooth tarmac. You know, they want to get to him and get to the capsule door and get the thumbs up. So they were giving them some punishment, and they look good. Oh, and they were dirty and used, and that's good.
Right. So one thing that I wanted to say, so the R1S drove them from wherever staging area to the actual rocket. And as it was going down the road, there was like this long thing on the roof rack, like a long, looked like ski poles in a pack, could be in a package. But then I realized it's a tarp. It rolls out. It gives what do you call that, Kyle? Your mic's muted, but it comes out the side of a travel trailer.
Like an awning?
A canopy?
Yeah, right. Thank you. Oh, man. Right. An awning. Yeah, it's built right in. It was color coded with the car, and it looks like really nice. Like set up your camping thing. So you pull it out, you pull out the kitchen, you're under the awning. It's all part of that package.
I'm just really bummed about this delay, and now we cannot believe the September timeframe because of the last delays led to another delay.
Yeah,
so if we look at history, which tends to repeat itself, the September delay should, in theory, based off of past experiences, lead to yet another delay. So when are we going to see these things? Maybe next year. No, it's true. It's true.
I mean,
look, I hope I'm wrong.
There's a good point. It's a good point. Like now, I have less confidence in this. I mean, I had full confidence that they were going to be out in July.
Not a good look.
Now they say September, but I don't have. I mean, it's COVID, or it's chips, it's whatever. But I'm losing. I'm not even waiting for a truck. So I can imagine how customers feel right now.
You're all going to be over here anyway with me in September when the cars finally get released. You're going to miss them because you're over here.
I know. Well, that's okay. We'll come up with more interesting things. By the way, I've booked an ID3 for my European trip, so we're going to be doing stuff, and a Honda E, and I'm working on an RS e-tron GT and the Fiat 500e. And so we're going to do a whole Euro EV series, which will be really fun. And I'd love to take a trip up to Norway.
Yeah, we can compare and contrast because I've got an ID3 from the middle of August, and so this is the Life Pro spec, so whatever your spec is. So we can, I can drive over to Germany and we can we can compare and contrast. That'd be cool.
I'm just going to ask for the biggest battery because not that I need the
Yes.
range. I just want to go as fast as possible in the Autobahn for the longest period of time.
Oh, right.
Yes,
Top speed
yes,
run,
do that.
Top speed Autobahn run on
Yeah, we're
battery.
going to do top
Yes,
speed in all of the slowest cars.
People want to see those. People love those videos for whatever reason.
We're doing 101 miles an hour. Hold on tight, folks.
But range test. Range test.
Range test at top speed.
That's right.
When I was on the Taycan press drive, I was with Alex Dykes from Alex on Autos, and we paired up, and we were driving the Taycan Turbo S at 167 miles an hour, and you could see the range at the meter just do this as we're driving that fast.
I've never experienced that allegedly on the road in a Taycan before.
So really quickly, we got to go, but I just want to also mention that GM is going to have its own version. GMC is going to have its own version of the Silverado pickup truck that Chevy's doing, of course. That was out this week. And Valmet Automotive, that's a small contract manufacturer. Where are they, in Norway or Sweden? One of the Scandinavian countries. They're going to be building the Finland. Oh, yeah, that's right. The Lightyear 1 EV. Right, in Finland, right, of course, from 2022. So that's kind of an interesting vehicle. We don't really talk about the Lightyear 1, but it's like a solar car of sorts. And yeah, so but the story's on Inside EVs, so go check it out.
Wait, they're building a solar car for a piece of land that gets a lot of rain and snow.
Well, that's
and
where
clouds?
they're building it. That's not
Okay.
where they're building it for necessarily.
Ah, cool. Well, that's exciting.
But yeah. But yeah,
I like solar. I'm all in on this solar thing, by the way. You can see I got this solar controller here. I'm always parking the van to get the most amount of sunlight on top of it.
Do your panels flip up at all?
Not yet. I'm going to make a cooler array.
Okay, right on. All right, so that brings us to the end of our show. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them on the Inside EVs forum podcast thread or on our YouTube or Twitch comment sections. If you like the show, please give us a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube, or a rating if you're listening on another platform. Don't forget, you can find and follow our panelists on Twitter. Tom Longley is at Tomlog. Martin Lee is at EV News Daily. Kyle Connor is at It's Kyle Connor. And I'm at Dominic_Y. Click subscribe, please, and tap that bell icon for notifications. And we'll see you all again next week. Ciao.